Some of you expressed interest in a video about how I go about composing. Well, I have here my very earliest attempts from when I was 6 or 7 years old. And in fact, where is it? Here, this prelude in C major, I think, is my very first shot at putting notes on paper. Looking at it now, I find it completely hilarious. Although clearly I knew where the different pitches went on the staves, the note values don't add up at all, so apparently I had no sense of rhythm. And the whole thing is just a lot of very basic broken chord figures and scale fragments strung together with no thematic development or harmonic modulation whatsoever. I think that's how I envisioned it sounding, but I'm not sure because the note values don't make any sense. Oh, and I added a whole bunch of helpful editorial footnotes at the bottom, because all the best scores have helpful editorial footnotes, right? 1. The C on the left hand with a marcato accent has to be secured by pedal only. Oh, so I guess I have to play it like this. Except that when I was writing this, I was playing on an electric piano that had no pedal, so clearly I was really looking ahead to the future here. Looking at these is like looking at old crayon doodlings and realizing that what you thought was a masterpiece is actually just a whole bunch of incongruous, cruelly executed images lumped together. All of the scores in this binder are basically like this, but it does seem that I had the same attitude that I do today toward actually assembling pieces of music. I tend to think of it as a playground or a laboratory where you have a pile of musical toys or gadgets or devices that you play around with and you combine in as many different ways as strike your fancy. And hopefully, if you do this enough, you build up enough of a sense of what works that pieces fly together more easily. Also, the more you listen to or play or transcribe other composers' music, the more tricks of the trade you get to know. Or if devices and gadgets aren't quite your thing, you can think of it in terms of painting. If you've ever seen Bob Ross on the TV show The Joy of Painting, it's pretty much like that. In fact, imagine what it would be like if Bob Ross composed music. Welcome back. Certainly glad you could join me here, because today I thought we'd just write a happy little piano piece. We've got our manuscript paper, and we've got our pencil, and we've got our big old grand piano, so let's get started. First, we have to pick ourselves a key, and I thought today we'd write in the key of D major. It's such a bright and cheery key. Now we have to pick ourselves a tune. So we start with the basic notes of the D major chord and the D major scale. And we just play around with these and see where they lead us. How about this? Always remember to leave room for silence. Music has to breathe, even piano music. Now then, we take our left hand, and we're not going to worry about details just yet. We just want to fill in the basic harmony. So we find some chords to fit our melody. Tell you what, let's add a couple shadows. Not too many because we don't want this to get too dark. Just a couple minor chords. Now we take our left hand and we break it up into these little up and down strokes, like this. This is one of the easiest ways to write a left-hand accompaniment. the right hand do something different here. Let's have it go up and over. And let's add a trill in here, just a happy little trill. Now then, we have to start making some decisions. Every piece of music tells a story, and one of the favorite stories that all the great composers liked to tell is how the music goes from D major into the neighboring key of A major, and then comes back home, but takes a little longer because it gets lost on the way. It's a great story, and we can tell this too. So first, let's take our left hand and figure out how we're going to get from D major to A major, just the basic harmonies. Just like that, 7 chords, and we've already moved into A major. Now we have to find a melody that will fit this harmony we've chosen. And then we take our left hand and break it up into the same up and down strokes. Tell you what, let's add a couple more trills in here, just a couple happy little trills. Here's one. And let's give him a friend over here. Everyone needs a friend, even a trill. Now then, let's have some fun. We need a new theme now that we're in A major, something completely different. How about something really lively, like, how about this? It's like having a happy little squirrel running around on the keyboard. Tell you what, let's have the left hand do something completely different. All that up and down work, let's have it jump around instead. Let's have it hop around like a little bunny rabbit on the ground to go with the squirrel up in the tree. What if we have the squirrel jump into a higher branch right here? See, you can make all kinds of little things happen. It's your world, your piece of music. You do what you want with it. Well, if it doesn't come out quite the way you want, remember, we don't make mistakes here. We have happy accidents. Maybe the squirrel leapt a little too far and fell out of the tree, but he got up and scampered off. He's okay. Well, you get the idea. But really, the lab phase of composition is very much like that. But to tell the truth, quite a lot of the composing process doesn't happen in the lab. Before the whole lab phase, there's the idea gathering phase. Think of Beethoven. He famously walked everywhere writing in his music sketchbook all the time. And I used to think that what he was up to was he was in his lab phase wherever he went, that he was working out some compositional problem on paper. And yes, he was doing some of that, but that's not the whole story. The best explanation I've heard of the idea gathering phase comes not from the world of classical music, but from rock musician David Lee Roth, who was the frontman for the band Van Halen. David made an appearance a year or two back on Joe Rogan's podcast where he talked about this, although he was talking about writing song lyrics, but it applies equally well to instrumental music. The point is, you need to cast as wide a net as possible for ideas. So anything you hear, whether it's a snippet of a melody on the radio or a chord progression, or it's the vocal cadence of your next door neighbor yelling over the fence, or a bird or a locomotive horn or a squeaky door or some clanking rhythm of factory machinery. Whatever it is, you write it down and you make your pile of ideas, of what I call musical toys and gadgets, as big as you can, so that when you come back to your lab phase, you don't lack for ideas. Or even if you're working on a specific project, say you're trying to write a piece of music to depict the ocean, you can just reach into the pile and at a moment's notice grab out as many ideas as you need that make you think of waves or coastlines or salty air or storms at sea or whatever. Take as one example this passage from my Dodecatet. That clarinet figure is actually an imitation of a duck quacking next to me that I heard when I was sitting out on the rocks with my music notebook. And I wrote it down. I had no idea what I was going to use it for, but I knew that I could use it in something someday. Then there's a whole nother phase of composition, which is kind of halfway between idea gathering and lab work, and that is improvisation. And I honestly don't understand enough about improvisation to be able to explain it here. All I know is that when I try improvising, about 75% of what I come up with sucks, and the other 25% is so good that I'm usually able to use it verbatim in compositions. Take, for example, this passage from my piano piece, Mischief Afoot. It occurs somewhere in the middle. That passage is taken almost note for note from an improvisation I made almost 7 or 8 years ago when I was making my 1812 Overture video. I was just warming up in front of the camera. I sat down and that came out of nowhere. And I'm so glad I had the camera on because I knew as I was playing it I could use it for something. But I knew I wasn't going to get around to it just then, so I put it on the pile, so to speak, and it sat there for a few years until I came up with some other ideas that I thought would go well with it. So if there's one thing to keep in mind that's really important, it's that any idea you come up with, no matter how silly or goofy it might seem, it's worth hanging on to because you never know, you might be able to make something good out of it someday. In fact, I wonder if some of this childhood goofiness could actually be turned into serious music. I don't know. I can't stop laughing when I look at these now. Footnote 2. The previous note is then let go. Yeah, I think I figured that out on my own. Thanks, 6-year-old me. See you next video. This is Ben, signing off.